Chapter 4, Optimizing Windows. So in this chapter, we're focusing on tools to help troubleshoot and optimize Windows. We're going to learn about some additional Windows utilities for problem solving, learn how to improve performance, and learn how to manually remove software. So the utility that we're going to be talking about are going to be the shell and the kernel, task manager, MSconfig, the service console, computer management, the MMC snap-in, the event viewer, reliability and performance monitor, and we're going to end with registry editors. Alright, so keep in mind, this is more geared towards Windows 7 and lower. MSconfig is still in Windows 8 and above. It's just, it cannot do the same thing than Windows 8 and above. So the first thing we have to talk about is, what is a shell? The shell is a portion of an OS that relates to the user and to the applications. For example, provides tools such as Windows Explorer and the Windows Desktop. This is made up of subsystems that we can use. So this is the portion that we interact with. The kernel is responsible for the interacting with hardware, or is also known as the core portion of the operating system. It has two main layers. The HAL, hardware abstraction layer, and this is the layer closest to the hardware, and it has an ECSI or an ESI layer, which is the executive service interface, which operates between the user mode, the subsystems, and the HAL. The kernel is the big part, because this is the component dealing with the hardware, and our portion, which is more of the user interaction / software. So how Windows manages applications are called processes or processes, and a program that is running under the authority of the shell. The shell will call the program or application, together with the system resource. So when a process makes a request for a resource to the Windows 32 subsystem, the request is typically known as a thread. The Win32 subsystem verifies that it's a valid application. A thread is a single task, such as printing a file that the process requests from the kernel. Sometimes the process is called an instance. Here's a graphical representation of printing. From the process, Word, exe, either to print a job or open a file. With the print job, it sends it to the Windows 32, then to the kernel. From the kernel, it sends it to the printer. If we're opening up a file, same structure. The key thing here is the process between Windows 32 and the kernel. That's a thread or a task. With multi-threading or multitasking, the kernel can handle more than one task at a time. Moving on, Task Manager. Task Manager displays applications, processes, and it also displays additional information about resource performance, whether it be memory, processor, network, could be a hard drive, and user activity. There are several ways to access Task Manager. Alt-Control-Delete. Right-click at the taskbar, go to Task Manager. Print Control-Shift. Start. Type in Task Manager. These are just a few of the ways. The end result should be our Task Manager. Our Task Manager loads up with 6 predefined tabs, Application tab being the first tab. And this is going to be the individual tasks that are in a running mode, and that is either running or non-responsive. If we want to end task on an object, you select the appropriate task and you end task. And there's multiple ways to end task. You can right click on the item end task, or there's an end task on the bottom. It depends on what you're doing. The next tab is the process tab. It lists the system services and other processes, the CPU time, memory usage. This helps to identify applications that are floating on a system. You can see it two different ways, just individual user and from all users' perspective. Here we go. On A, we are looking at just the processes for one user. On the right side, B, we are looking at all processes. So it just kind of depends on what you're looking at. The next tab is the Service tab, and it lists all current services and their statuses. The services are programs that do not need a human interaction. They're things that are running in the background that, again, need no user to interact with. You can interact with them to do tasks, but they are not required for a user. Things like power management, certain other key services, they're just going to be programs that are going to start when the computer starts or stop depending on criteria. The next tab is Performance, and the Performance tab shows resource for memory and for processor. If you want additional resources, you have to click on the Resource Monitor, bottom right hand side, and that will show you processor, memory, network, and hard disk performance. That way you can see a little bit more realistic expectations from those hardware items. Next is our Network tab. And our Network tab, again, shows our network resources for all of the different networks that we have. If we're plugged in wired and wirelessly, we're going to have two different charts, one for our wired, one for our wireless. Last but not least, for our task manager is going to be our users tab. And that is going to show the active users that we have logged in and logged off and or disconnected. That way you can see what users, what they're doing. If we are on a server, we can actually send messages to and from. If we're dealing with just a client operating system, we only have one user logged in at a time. So you can kick off other users, maybe in task on what they're doing. Might help with performance issues. Moving on from that is our administrative tools. And this can be found in Control Panel. And our administrative tools is a collection of advanced tools like System Component, Event Viewer, Performance Monitor, Print Manager, Services, Task Scheduler, System Configuration, Better Firewall Options. This is going to be where all of these are found. So let's go ahead and look up System Configuration. MSconfig. MSconfig, 5 tabs, General, Boot, Service, Startup, and Tools. This is not used in Windows 8 and above, so keep that in mind. You can use this to launch the startup and to temporarily disable certain processes from loading with the next startup. This also loads up services. So General will give us what options, very similar to do we want everything to start or more of a selective startup. The boot option gives us the ability to control how we're going to boot, similar to safe mode and safe mode with networking and safe mode with command prompt, but it's not quite the same. Services is where we're at. Startup will give you a list of all the items that are starting up so that you can check and uncheck depending on your requirements. And then last will be the tools and where they're at. So let's talk about services a little bit more in depth because there's a service console in the administrative tools. And here we can actually look at all of the services that we are going to be running. Their startup type, how they're being logged in, what their current status is, and a general description. The general service console, we can double click on any item to see if they're stopped running and if what we can do in the middle. We can change or manipulate the service startup types, things like auto delay, auto start with Windows manually, so you have to manually start and disable, and or just disable. Disables is flat out just stop. Moving on is our general computer management. We've done with this when we right click on a computer and click on manage. This is our computer management. It gives us a lot of tools all in one centralized area. And again, you can right click on computer and select manage, or go to Control Panel, Administrative Tools, Computer Management is there as well. And here is our Computer Management Console. Keep in mind, this is just a large collection of MMC snap-ins that give us our tools. Alright, this allows us to look at things like Task Scheduler, Event Viewer, Shared Folders, Local Users and Groups, Performance, so forth. Disk Management is also here. Remember, this is just a collection of management snap-ins, also known as Microsoft Management Console MMCs. And an empty MMC console has no snap-ins. We can add in the tools that we need based off of the tools that we need. Like if we need disk management, we add it in. If we need local users, we add it in. If we need task scheduler, we add it in. This management console can be customized. Event Viewer is one of the big ones. We can customize all of our needs. Event Viewer is going to be one of the big ones. Event Viewer allows us to view events. We use this tool for troubleshooting problems with Windows. There are three main types of events: errors, which are red, warnings, which are yellow, and informational, which is just no color at all. We have several different types of logs. Administrator event logs, which that's not one of the main logs. Our main logs are application, security, setup, and system. Those are our four main logs. Under application, shows the event recorded by an application. Under security, that's going to include all logs for successful and unsuccessful logins to user accounts. That could also be built-in accounts that not a real user uses, like the system account or the network admin account. Those are not accounts that we log in as, but the computer log in as. Next, setup log. That's the event when applications are installed. Lastly, system log. Those are the events triggered by Windows components. Those are the four primary logs: application, security, setup, system. Administrative and forwarded event logs are additional logs that aren't the default four. The admin logs show only warnings and event errors intended for the administrator. The forward event logs are where the logs that are received from other computers are going to be stored at. Event Viewer saves time by reviewing logs by using filters. So you're not looking at hundreds of thousands of logs. You can be fine-tuning your viewing needs based off of filters. You can save the filtered log files. You can clear the logs. That's a lot harder than it seems. And you can manipulate our properties. Here's our big four. Under Windows Logs, we are looking at application, security, setup, and system. We can actually save filtered logged files. We can clear the filters. We can create filters. All of that is to allow us to filter ID logs. In our Properties pane down here, there are two major items you need to think about. Event ID. Event ID 5152. That's going to coincide with a unique ID of an error log. And a timestamp. You can actually do some online researching for event ID 5152, and you can see what error popped up. Or error code 4634, which happens to be the error code or the event ID for successful logoffs. Sometimes these items won't mean anything, sometimes they will. So yeah, that's just a nice little quick overview of our event viewer. Let's go ahead and hop over to our task scheduler. So task scheduler, schedule tasks. And you can have it set to launch a program, to do a task, to run an antivirus scan, to send an email, to run a script. So you have some options. And it's as simple as clicking create a basic task and going through the steps. Alright, one of the last major things we have to discuss today is the Registry Editor. so difficult problems might require editing or removal of a registry key. The registry organization. Registry. It's a database designed like a tree structure, like a hierarchy database. It contains configuration information for Windows users, software, and hardware. The registry is built in memory at startup. There are 5 registries which we call hives. Those hives are SAM, Security Account Manager, Security, Software, System, and the default hive. Registry organized into these 5 tree-like structures are called keys. Each key has a sub-key. A sub-key has more sub-keys, and so forth. Data is organized in a registry key differently than the way it's organized in the hive files. I have to love how confusing this gets. So the high-level keys, or H key, are current user, user, local machine, current configuration, and class root. And then underneath them there is subkeys depending on your requirement. Here is our graphical representation of our 5 hives. You will notice the H keys are the keys that we interact with, are not part of the SAM's hive or security hive. So what are the purpose of the 5 H keys? Local machine contains hardware and software and security data. Current configuration is used to identify each hardware device. Class root determines what application opens. Users, it's all data about all users. And current user is just about data about specific users. Before editing the registry, you should back it up. How do you actually edit the registry? You just go to Start, type regedit, and that will allow you to start editing the registry. Here's our graphical representation. Here is our different H keys. These are subkeys and subkeys and subkeys. These are our data values that we can be manipulating and our path. We can delete programs if we go to the appropriate local machine software, Microsoft Windows current version, run. This will show you all programs that are running at startup. This is one way of doing it, not the best, but this is one option. Moving on, Windows 7 tools for monitoring performance and optimizing resources. Resource Monitor, Reliability, and Performance Monitor. Resource Monitor we touched on with Task Manager. These tools will give us information to evaluate the overall performance. You can go to a computer's property and look at the performance information and tools, or you can just go to the Action Center and look at performance information. One of the first ones is the Windows Experience Index Evaluation. The components look at 5 components from a rank of 1 to 7.9. However, not all components are ranked at 7.9. Hard drives are more in the 6. Here is our performance index score. It will do an index score for processor, memory, graphics, 3D graphics, and the primary hard disk. And the actual score is based off of the lowest setting, or lowest score. So Resource Monitor is Resmon. Its job is to monitor performance of the processor, memory, hard disk, and network. We already took how to access it via Task Manager, but that's one of the big ones. The Memory tab in Resource Monitor shows 5 ways memory is used. That's hardware reserved memory, in-use memory, modified memory, standby memory, and free memory. So if we looked at specifically memory, we can see in-depth breakdown of our memory, how it's being utilized. Our overview will give us a brief overview of all major four: CPU, memory, disk, and network. But the individual CPU, memory, disk, and network will give us more detailed information. Like processor or hard disk will show us response times. So you can use this to drill down. The resource monitor is the easiest way to determine if memory upgrade is needed. You can start seeing if there are applications using far more memory, or if there's not enough free memory. You can use the graphical charts. Next is our reliability monitor after our resource monitor. Here we can see a chart for how often a PC has been on, restarted, critical events. This is not always functioning in all versions of Windows. This is one that has been a great idea. It's not always been the best to implement though. But this will show you times and events that have crashed or things of that nature. So let's go back to our performance monitor. Performance monitor is just another snap-in. You can look at it through the administrative tools, but this allows you to check the overall performance of components. It contains hundreds of counters used. So there is some things there. Assuming Windows starts with no error, we can use a 10 step-by-step procedure to find problems, or for improving performance. Step 1, perform routine maintenance. Step 2, clean Windows startup. Also for cleaning Windows startup, it could be like observe performance in safe mode, investigate or eliminate starting up programs that are unwanted, check for unwanted scheduled tasks, monitor startup tasks. Step 3, check if the hardware can support the operating system. That's pretty straightforward stuff. Step 4, check for performance warnings. Look at performance information. See if there's ways to better improve. That could also be adjusting visual settings so it's not as pretty. Check for a history of problems. See if there are known problems. Step 6, maybe disable the index for Windows search. That does require more resources to be used, but if you're searching a lot, the indexer allows you to search a lot. So step 6 is kind of varied. Step 7, plug up any memory leaks. We normally can view this through Resource Monitor or Performance Monitor, so you can see where the memory is having problems. Step 8, maybe consider using Ready Boosts or a faster hard drive, things of that nature. Maybe the consideration could be disable the arrow interface. You may not like the higher graphical desktop. You can move to one that is a basic desktop, so you don't have any of the 3D graphics. That would improve performance, but the graphic representation would be kind of horrible. Step 10, disable the Vista sidebar. You may not need the sidebar. You may need the sidebar. It just kind of depends. From Control Panel, you can actually get rid of it. Alright, moving on to manually removing software. This is something that I do not recommend. You can do it though, but normally the programs have uninstallers. Use the uninstaller first. Only do this as a last resort. But once you've done the uninstaller, you can delete the program folder and files, delete the registry entries, remove the entries in Start menu and all the shortcuts, and remove any entry that launch processes at startup. Step 1, try the uninstaller first. Step 2, delete all the program files. So double check program files and program files x86. Make sure all of those components are gone. Next, go to wherever you're looking for the registry keys for that software. Double check our textbook. Make sure you have a backup of the registry first. Make sure you're only deleting the registry keys for the program you're uninstalling. Be very careful. Next, remove the program from all programs. Next, step 5, remove startup processes. Make sure that there are no process startups that are going to be calling this program. Registry keys that affect startup and logon events. That's something that you're going to have to be aware of. And that's actually it for this chapter. There's a lot of detail. The big thing is Task Manager, Event Viewer, and be careful about using the registry. I wanted to thank you guys and hope you guys have a great day. Thank you.